went off and did something.
Yeah, no, okay, we're live then.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay.
You want to do the introduction? Because
1 second. Let me get the chat up
all right.
on my end.
Okay.
We can just wait for people to went off and did something.
Yeah, you guys go getting started. I'll be back in like 5 minutes or less.
Okay. Hey, we still have
Let me.
Is Mac in the stream tonight?
Oh yeah, I need to like...
No.
Yeah, give me a second.
On my end. We can just wait for people to file in, because right now only 3 people are watching.
Okay.
There. I fixed the handles.
No, Mac is not in the stream tonight.
Yeah, I removed it. Don't worry. Alright, I'll be right back.
Right now only 3 people are watching.
Hey,
We have
Colton,
an
you're kind of
echo
going.
somewhere.
Yeah, you're kind of going back and forth in my earbuds. I don't know if you got something going on.
No, Mac is not in.
Yeah, you keep fading in and out,
Hello?
Colton.
What I think happened was I had the stream going as well.
Oh, okay.
I had my headphones on, so maybe it was just me that had the echo.
Yeah, I have my stringed headset in from my new phone instead of the normal ones I use.
Yep.
One of the left one's not charging. I don't know what's up with that. So
Yep. And hello, everyone that's watching. Let me know what's going on in the chat. We'll start up here in a few minutes. We're just gonna wait for some people to actually get in the stream. I'll tweet out that we're streaming. Oh. So, I am Colton. The other person on tonight is Emo.
hello.
I believe that Isaac and Volnos and all of them have just gotten busy and weren't able to do the reading.
Yeah, I haven't heard from Isaac.
Yep. Isaac's been busy building up the site though, so
Yeah.
it's all good. Hello, Hoomps.
Oh, that's my friend.
Hello, Emo's friend. Let me see if restarting this will show us a different watching now. So the purpose of this podcast is to go through Austrian economic and libertarian books and to have people read along and ask us questions or have comments while we're going through the various chapters. It's also to kind of explain what the chapters are about, in case people just don't quite understand what's going on. But we do want a discussion with the chat, so post questions, post comments, things like that. We also want a suggestion of books that fit with the theme of Austrian economics and libertarianism. Now, if it's something outside of Austro-libertarianism, we'll keep that on the back burner until we get to some of the main books of Austro-libertarianism and Austrian economics. But so we really want to focus on that. But in the future, this podcast will go over other things like Milton Friedman, like David Friedman, the Chicago School generally, such things like that. But we really just want to keep it to learning with everyone what this school of libertarianism is all about, and then we can then go into other schools and learn what they're about and criticize it, because like I used to be a big proponent of the Chicago school, but I left it for various reasons. Anyway, do you have anything to add to that?
Not really. Hopefully, this is the first time I'm actually going to be talking about the subject of a chapter or two myself, so hopefully I don't butcher it and embarrass myself. But
yeah, so
I've got
so what's been going on is that I've been basically making the notes and going just keeping the stream on track, but that's not how it's going to happen this time. I'm going to have help from Emo. He's done some chapters, I've done some chapters, so it's lessened my workload considerably.
it's all part of the division of labor.
Yep.
But I've got my coffee, so do you want to go ahead and get into it, or wait for Kyle to get right back?
Well, chapter 11 is about tariffs. I don't know how much you can do without those graphs.
Well, I was gonna try to go through, the
book.
points. Yeah, go through the points, and then we can bring up those graphs. Because honestly, I don't have much to say. I just wanted to explain what's going on with them.
Yep. And
So
we'll have some discussion about chapter 11 afterwards that we can talk about, because the Mises audio, their interview, doesn't really go over the book. It kind of talks around what the topic is, and I think it brings up some interesting points. So, take us away, Emo.
All right, so in the beginning of the book, he just goes over how that governments and popular opinion haven't caught up with Adam Smith, and one of the points he makes is that they're both the real and pretended reasons for tariffs are the same and as bad as they were in the 17th century.
Now,
in every
yeah, and why would that be?
would you say that again?
So why would the real and pretended reasons be as bad as they were in the 1600s?
Because they're both based on the fallacy of looking at the short-term problem and putting in a solution that will have long-term disastrous consequences. These policies only benefit the producer that is lobbying for these tariffs, instead of helping the worker or the consumer itself.
And what I was trying to drive at was it was these lobbying efforts that is the reason why thinking on so many of these economic topics are so backwards.
Right. But yeah, I guess moving on. But part of the reason for this is in every Adam Smith would say in every country it always is and must be the interest of the great body of the people to buy whatever they want of those who will sell it the cheapest. And he argues that there's not even any point in trying to prove this, because you want to get the best thing for the cheapest price.
Right. And this is actually kind of where just bringing up something from a different topic that we talked about before the stream. This is kind of where this point kind of shows where Austrian economics differs from classical economics and neoclassical economics, where what you just said is generally true, but there's a range of prices that someone will be willing to pay. No one would be willing to pay like $1 from a retard for a house that the retard just inherited.
Right.
At least no moral person. And so there's certain things that are outside of economics that might constrain what you'd be willing to buy or what you'd be willing to sell for.
Mm-hmm.
But there would be no but when it comes to economics, this is true. It's just that people are not just economical beings. They're not homo economic. What is it? Go ahead,
I think that was right.
Yeah.
I think that was right. But yeah, I don't think generally like people are always going to buy the cheapest thing because there could be something that's cheap, but it's it's higher quality and just a little bit more expensive than the cheapest thing. So,
Right.
and then there's also moral considerations such as, giving some mentally incapacitated person like $1 for a house they inherited, and because that's just wrong. And if a community saw that you had done that, then you would be in trouble with the rest of the community. There's
Yep.
no there wouldn't be
Yep.
a justification in most people's eyes for doing something like that.
Right. And so this comes up to the Austrian school saying that there's a minimum threshold. There's a minimum and maximum that you'd pay for something. And it's not necessarily just based on economics, but is the minimum you'd buy for something. There might be more considerations as well, or some other consideration. That's not pure economics that would limit you. I can't really think of anything other than a moral reason, but people, it's just the fullness of the human experience versus just economics.
Right. There's a whole lot of factors that go into why you would buy something for a certain price, but mostly you would try to get something for
Yeah.
for the least amount that you could.
Yeah.
So but after that, hold on, let me look for a second. But he goes into saying that free trade is one aspect of the specialization of labor. Why would somebody attempt to make something that would cost more to make than just buying it from somebody else selling cheaper? Like why would a tailor buy boots or why would a tailor make boots when he could just buy the boots? Because the tailor would have to buy the leather, the rubber, the fabrics to make the strings, and and then put it all together to make the boots when he could just buy one from a shoe manufacturer for much cheaper. It's already done. The labor's already been put in to make it.
Yep.
So, and then vice versa. Why would the shoemaker try to make shirts, that people have their specializations in certain like industries and stuff.
Right. And this is kind of what people don't really understand about imports and exports is it's literally what you just described, but outside of national borders.
Right.
And so like you can obviously tell that like the plumber down the street, you might want to hire him to fix something in your house. And you can obviously see this is a specialization of labor, division of labor as well. But it's the same thing that happens between nations. One nation might be really, really good at growing food, like America is, but another nation like Singapore might be really good at manufacturing cheap electronics.
Right.
And so, just as the plumber down the street is very good at fixing plumbing, the Singapore is just better at making electronics.
Right. And you can really like to justify, I guess to help justify this, you could literally just look at it in a microcosm of, where of the plumber, down the street from you. You could hire him, like just zooming out and looking at this from like a nation perspective, it's the same exact logic. Why would you waste your time with something that you don't know how to do as well as somebody else could do, and probably break something or get tools that you didn't necessarily need, when you could just go to the guy right there and be like, hey, and he'll do it for whatever price,
Yep.
and probably better than you could.
Yep. Yeah.
You got anything to add to that?
No, I'm thinking about what to say about the next point, so go ahead.
Okay. It's a fallacy to consider the short-term effects of tariffs on one group and not the long-term effects on other groups. So, um, say, let me try to remember an example. Say trying to think,
Well,
a sugar, like a
well,
sugar industry or something. What were you about to say?
yeah, that's actually another example that the Mises Institute, when they were going through this book, they talked about. It's that we pay 3 times as much as the world on sugar because of sugar pricing, essentially, and
Right,
sugar tariffs. So and it's really destroying the Floridian ecology. And the reason for this is to support sugar farmers. But why would we want to support sugar farmers that are less efficient than they are elsewhere in the world, when that capital and that labor could be put to more efficient uses in America?
right. And then part of the effects of these tariffs has resulted in people using
High
corn,
fr-
high fructose corn syrup,
Yep.
which is not particularly good for you.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just that it's not tariffs that are making high fructose corn syrup um more profitable to use, but it's also the fact that we have subsidies, and we're going to be getting to that in believe chapter 13. So at least into some types of subsidization of the farming economy. I think that next week is actually when we're going to get to price fixing, which is really where the corn industry gets a lot of its profits from.
Right. And but we can also look, like, seeing how putting a tariff on the sugar industry, we are basically also subsidizing, we're subsidizing the sugar industry here by forcing you to pay extra money that you wouldn't have had to pay when you could be better spending it on the more immediate needs and the labor that would organically be demanded had that
Yep.
not come into place originally.
Yep, and also by increasing the price of one product, people seek alternatives like that high fructose corn syrup. So let's
Yeah.
get to the point 4.5, because I think this really illustrates it and it's straight out of the book.
Yeah. So, a tariff of $5 on a good may keep a business in existence, but consumers are now deprived of $5 that would be better spent by those consumers. Repealing that tariff may cause a business to fail, but the consumers would be able to purchase that same good for cheaper in another nation, furnishing them with money that could be spent back in America for cheaper American goods than they have in their own nation. Labor, land, and capital would organically shift to where it was needed most.
Yep, and so this is another argument why you can't, in the long run, have a deficit in imports and exports. Either way, because that money has to be spent somewhere. And
Right.
typically, in a foreign country, they can't use US dollars to pay their workers, to pay rent, and such things. And so they need to either pay for American goods or trade with someone else in that country that does need US dollars to purchase American goods.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think that's a good illustration. This is also kind of interesting. Is people have so much said that this book is dated, but what's really being shown is like maybe the examples are dated, but all of the same things are happening today. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
we need fair trade, not free trade, and such things like that. It's just these arguments really hold water today. So I think this,
Yeah,
yeah,
fair trade is a myth. It's still only helping producers and lobbyists.
yeah,
Um, yeah, we've been seeing the results of Trump's trade war in general,
yep,
but I guess moving on to point five, but imposing tariffs on goods that American consumers were already buying from other nations in order to create business in America would force American consumers to subsidize the industry. It would essentially be taxed by a higher price. Americans would be employed in a sweater industry who weren't before, but there would be no net addition to industry or employment. Because the consumer had to pay extra for American goods, he would have less to spend elsewhere. In order to grow one business, others would have to shrink. So that's kind of like a reiteration of what we said a couple of times already, but just more so explaining it and the
yeah,
consequences.
yeah, and by yeah, it also goes to the efficiency argument. Is not only like this is assuming like everything is as efficient, but if let's say not cotton, sugar is less efficient to produce in America than it is somewhere else, it actually doesn't make any sense for it to be produced in America because it would, all scarce resources that we have on this planet would be better used in other areas of the economy. And really, this opportunity cost is really going to be driven home in chapter 15. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we do have a graph for the efficiency argument going. I think going from the Civil War up to like 2000 and just seeing, the how effective it was, but we'll get to that at some point.
yeah, I guess
Is
when we're
Kyle back
wrapping up,
yet?
he is.
What's up, Kyle?
What's up?
Not much. So let's I guess move on to number 6. Um but yeah, now we're getting into the seen and the unseen. So what is seen is the new employment, but what is unseen is all the industry that could have used those workers and the money better used.
Mhm.
And just another,
Yeah,
these last couple of points have just been like reiterations, but focusing on like a slightly different point of it.
yeah.
Did you have anything to say? Sorry.
Only to say that money is representative of capital. So when we say money better used, we could basically say capital better used. This is
Okay.
just to, again, as we were talking about last week, get rid of the what is it, the conceptualize. So there's basically a facade that's kind of happens in economics that you think about money as its own little thing instead of seeing that it really represents real things like how much money your business makes is actually dependent on how much you produce of real
Hmm.
things and how much those things are valued in the economy, which is translated into dollars. And
Hmm.
so it's just I, I think that's a really important point, so I'm going to keep on bringing it up when we talk about money and things like that.
Yeah, I need to try to remember to try to use correct terms.
Oh no, it's a correct term. It's just something that I'm particular about, I guess.
Okay, well, the more I read and learn, the more I'll I'll get it more. Because I really have been learning since we started doing this.
Mhm.
I'm enjoying it. Um, but yeah, as for the new employment with the seen and the unseen, when you introduce a tariff, basically maybe to bring a business into existence, um, you see all the new jobs, but you don't see all the labor that could have been going into different industries or learning new skills or the resources being put to use that could have had some other innovation rather than being used, I don't know, to build, the whatever it takes for sugar processing and all that. Um, there's a lot of seen consequences, but nobody sees the unseen. You can't go back and redo it.
Right, and so the unseen is purely within the realm of basically economics. Economic studies. You actually have to think about what would have happened if you hadn't done it. And
Right,
so that's why it's so often ignored.
right. Um, I guess to move on to 7. Tariffs reduce capital, land, and labor by deflecting what could have been done more efficiently to being done less so. Because the consumer has less to spend elsewhere, his purchasing power is reduced.
Yep.
And I pretty much kind of said that right there too.
Yep.
When making these notes, I just kind of like wrote down what stuck out, but it's it really is just reiterating in
Yeah.
different bits. So I guess we
Well,
can.
and that's a point of
It's
good
a good
writing.
thing.
Yeah, it's a thing of good writing because I've noticed that like on some of the articles I've written like I have 2 paragraphs explaining a point, and then um I'll get comments and stuff like that about what about this point that you've written about, and I'm just like, but it's there.
Oh
um
yeah, with the whole with the whole crypto
yeah.
drama.
Well, it's also been about what do I mean by implicit secession and things like that. How is it going to bring about libertarianism when I have an entire paragraph there saying that this is not necessarily to bring about libertarianism. It's just to get rid of the federal government so we can try to bring about libertarianism in a location, like in a
Right,
geographic region.
right. It's more so strategy than anything else.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Where were we? Both a high. Okay, so 8. Both a high or prohibitive tariff would hurt American producers because there would be no currency exchange, thus keeping consumers in other nations from being able to spend the money they would have made back in American industry.
Yep.
So basically, if you have a tariff that's so high that people won't be able to say Americans wouldn't be able to spend money in
To buy
uh,
foreign goods.
yeah, to buy foreign goods. So that country would not be getting American goods that they can in turn and spend on cheaper goods that they need than they have in their own country over here.
Yeah, it's
Um,
basically just reiterating what we've said before. And let me just wrap this up with 9. Tariffs, in effect, also create government revenue and more taxes from the sales. And that's really what tariffs were originally supposed to be for America. They were supposed to be the main way the American government gets money because you can't tariff too much. Otherwise, people will stop buying foreign goods altogether. And so it was supposed to be a way of limiting government um, taxes and therefore limiting American the American government how much they can spend. And
right,
that's why so many people are against the federal bank, because the federal bank could inflate their way into having a balanced budget, so to say.
Right. Which that would be a perfect time to bring up the graphs because you just brought up the first one in that.
Hey, Kyle.
It's
Okay.
the World Trade one,
Is
right?
it? Hang on. I have to bring up the. Yeah, bring up the World Trade one first.
All right, it's up.
All right. I'm waiting for it to pop. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, um, so you can see throughout the 50s and 60s, it had little. There was little trade to begin with. It didn't really get into the reasons for that. I'm sure Colton probably knows why there was less trade during the 50s and 60s.
Because
But
of the
Because
war,
we-
maybe.
yeah,
because
I was assuming it was the war, but
Because
We
we
didn't
bombed every other country that was a major industrial power. We bombed Japan, we bombed Germany, the Germans bombed France and Britain, so we were basically the only ones producing industrial goods. And that's why the 1950s, were so good for America, is just because they had no competition.
right.
And there's other reasons as well, like the 90% highest income tax bracket. People were able to avoid it by going into local government bonds and such things like that. So they, instead of paying 90% taxes, they'd pay something like 3%, so on and so forth. So because people were able to evade taxes so well, American business was booming.
Right. And then after the 60s, you can start seeing that trade starts to take off a little bit. And then when you get into the 80s, it's ascending, and then when it gets up into the 90s, it starts skyrocketing. And you can see in 2008, there's the crash, and then we have a pretty.
Hey, you have all your used wet towels that you can't use.
I'm
Oh.
doing the thing, Mom. Mom says, "Hey."
Hi.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was about to say,
but yeah.
do you need to mute and I can just go over this?
Oh no, you're good. I had her get out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in 2008 we have the crash, and then we start going back up. And if you want to move on to the second graph, you can go into the that next one. If you have anything to say about that, the World Trade one.
The only thing I could say is we don't really see what happens before World War II. And I'd be kind of interested in seeing world trade from the 1800s all the way up until World War One, because that's the era before we, or even all the way to World War Two, because that's the era that we had restrictive tariffs. Because before World War One, we were using that to fund the government, but also, people that Hazlitt is responding to actually put in tariffs, protectionist tariffs to protect American industry. And so I'd like to be able to compare what happened since the 1970 to what was happening before, because I also want to see if it's the same exponential graph or if it's much more curtailed.
On the next graph, it's the 1870s through the 1960s. So Kyle, could you bring up the second one?
Done.
It's the one with the red and the blue.
Yep, it's up.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's as you can see, in the 1800s, the trade was much more restricted than it was in the 1950s and beyond. And that's because we went from being a government that gets its taxes from tariffs to a government that gets its taxes from income.
Right, and that's that can be seen clearly from in the 1870 to not much further into it. and then the you can see that the tariffs were dramatically dropped
Yeah.
up
So
until. Go ahead.
yeah. So 1910 is when the Federal Reserve came into be. It's also when we got the income tax. Woodrow Wilson decreased tariffs essentially, and then in the 1920s, I believe it was the Republicans that introduced the Hawley um, tariff and such things, brought it up to in the 1930s, and then it just declined after that because basically income tax and inflation replaced tariffs as a means of financing government.
And also during the 1900s through the and after that, it's also showing where that's when the Great Depression happened and all that too. Starting in the 30s. And yeah, so if you wanna move on to the next graph.
It's up.
Okay. Yep.
It's
So this
taking
is
a second to show up
yeah
on my screen.
yeah. So this is the world average own tariff. And so you can see that in the interwar period, it went up, and that's because many people making the argument that tariffs are somehow good for you. This is also what the Japanese and Nazis did was they increased tariffs to try to prop up their own industries, and I don't know. We could talk about the economics of the Nazis in a different stream, but it was
Yeah, but you can
basically
see. Go ahead.
it was basically a backwoods economy that was predicated on slave labor. So it's just oh, we don't have any unemployment. Well, you've enslaved everyone, so that's why.
Yeah, but you can see after in the post-war period, tariffs were dramatically reduced. Uh, and there's not much to say on that slide. So if you want to go to the last one.
It's up.
Takes a second to show up on my screen.
Yeah,
Yep.
because there's a little bit of delay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a delay on the audio too, so when he says it's up and it's up on the stream, when we're talking, it's gonna be basically with them. So it's there's no there's no reason for you to wait until you can see the graph. You can just start talking
Right.
about it.
Right, and this is the efficiency graph, and you can see that before the Civil War, there wasn't a whole lot of need for the tariffs. But once the Civil War began, they implemented tariffs in order to fund the government and the war.
I don't understand this graph, so can you just explain it?
So it is pretty much just like is it helping industry, or is it helping to increase government revenue, is basically what's going on here. Um is it helping employment or and stuff like that, is basically what's being shown.
Interesting.
And
I'd have to actually read what like the average welfare cost is because I have no idea what that's supposed to mean.
yeah, I thought I had written something down for that, but I think I forgot to do that. But my apologies for that. But I think I forgot how to explain that. I'm sorry for everybody listening.
Yep.
Um,
We can just go to chapter 12 if
yeah,
you don't have anything else to say.
yeah.
Oh.
Let's go to chapter 12.
Okay.
So The first point for chapter 12, let me flip to it too so I can read anything. Exceeded only by the pathological dread of imports that affects all nations is the pathological yearning for exports. Logically, it is true, nothing could be more inconsistent. In the long run, imports and exports must equal each other, considering both in the broadest sense, which includes such invisible items such as tourist expenditures, ocean freight charges, and all other items in the balance of payments.
Right.
So,
Right. And so this is kind of you cannot import without exporting, because what trade is you trading for something. You giving something and you getting something in return. And so this is just money versus real things. If we talk about trading real things, it's easy to see why you cannot import without exporting.
right.
Now, Chapter 12 is basically against people who think that we can give loans to other countries so that they can pay us to buy goods, and then without ever caring about if those loans are paid back. And so a nation cannot grow rich by giving goods away. Loans to buy our goods, when not paid back, is giving away those goods.
Right.
Because basically, instead of giving the nation the goods just outright, you're giving them money to get the goods and then not getting anything for the money, which is basically this money versus real things that keeps on happening with these monetary cranks and such.
You see
Right.
this a lot with, military aid. Like, they'll just give away money to, like, countries like Ukraine and Israel, and, the only, like...
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and then the only thing that, the only requirement is that they spend that money on, the American military-industrial complex. And that's, like, basically no different from just, giving the money straight to the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, it's basically, yeah. The American government would probably be better off just giving them whatever weapons that they wanted and just paying the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so just as it is impoverishing to stimulate an export market through bad loans, it is impoverishing to give export subsidies to the export market. Because this is also essentially just giving things away, and you can't get rich by giving things away.
Right.
Yeah, I guess
'Cause-
there's, like, considering you're running a country, you may have, like, I guess, strategic reasons to do some of the things, but if you were at war and you just wanted to help out your allies or something, you could just send them, like, things directly.
But this is not
Yeah, you wouldn't be worrying about, just lending them money and having them buy your products.
right, but this isn't that's not an economic argument. That's a more of a military strategy argument.
Yeah.
You're not saying this because we're going to be so much richer if we give our allies arms or whatever.
Yeah, I agree.
So we can yeah, and he even talks about such things in these there might be other reasons to do these things, but it can't be that we're going to get richer from doing them. So yeah, this is an economics book, not anyways.
Yeah, and there's not like I was saying in the chat, there's not a whole lot to this chapter. It's basically saying like you can't just give money away and expect to get something in return, like to get paid back in full in return. It's not an equalized trade.
Yeah. Yeah. Which kind of leads us away from imports and exports, and foreign trade to more give subsidization and price setting of various industries. And so chapter 13 starts with saying that special interests can think of ingenious reasons why they should get special solicitude, basically special attention from the government. And one of these is parity prices. So the argument for parity prices, which will also explain what they are, is agriculture is the most basic and important of all industries. It must be preserved at all costs. The price of farm products fell, but during the Great Depression, the price of farm products fell, but industrial products did not. Thus, the farmer could not buy the industrial products, and thus industrial workers were laid off as sales declined. Then the workers could not buy farm goods, and the depression spread in ever-widening circles. The solution was to bring farm products back into parity with industrial products. So basically what parity means is an equalization of these prices. And so there's no reason to take these price relationships at some point in time as particularly sacrosanct or normal. There's no reason for the relationships to stay the same throughout time. As supply and demand increases and decreases, the price is going to change. And so just looking at, let's say, the price differential between farm goods and industrial goods at 1927 does not mean that it's going to be the same in 1936, 9 years later.
Right.
And so and one of the things is that these parity prices have really only been used for agricultural and industrial goods, but why not extend this to all commodities and against all commodities? Many will say comparisons are absurd, as some products are made better and cheaper today than they used to be, but that's exactly what Hazlitt is driving at. Why does, this holds true for increases in agricultural production and industrial production? Why isn't the market allowed to readjust prices for increases in productivity in these fields? This is ignored by the apostles of parity prices. And so the refusal to universalize the principle shows it is a device for special interests. So also, when prices go above parity, meaning that farming prices goes above the differential with industrial prices, they are not held to parity, nor are the subsidies forced to, paid back by the farmer. It only goes one way. Farming prices are only increased through government intervention. So, do you have anything to add?
No, not really.
Okay.
Kyle, do you have anything to say?
Not really. I didn't have time to read the chapters because I wasn't at home, so I'm not gonna have much to say this episode.
Yeah, for these last couple ones, I didn't have a whole lot of time because I was working a lot and trying to take notes on my chapters. But
Yep, that's fine. So let's talk about the mechanism of how these higher prices can be brought about. It can either be brought about by edict, by the government buying farm prices at quote-unquote parity price, by government lending, or a combination of these practices. The farmer are certainly more wealthy when they're able to sell at a higher price, and this is seen by only looking at the short-run effects of the parties directly involved, which is a general theme. So when prices are raised by edict, this is the least sustainable method. So Mises has one article, one really long article, and one book that goes over this. The article is "Middle of the Road Policy Leads to Socialism," and we're going to see an example from that article later on in this episode. And the other one is "Interventionism by Mises," and this by edict method is price control, and we're going to see another example of this in the next chapter.
Okay.
The farmer gains at the expense of the city worker. So yes, the farmer will get more money per bushel, but it forces a cut in production because there won't be as much. He won't be able to sell as many bushels. So his income overall will decrease based on this, unless you start controlling for other prices. And this is an argument made in Middle of the Road Policy by Mises. We'll see this in the next chapter. There's a really good example of it. Thus, the advocates have moved to parity incomes, but this can only be accomplished through subsidies. Because, if you artificially raise the price, people are going to buy less, so you can only have the same income. If the government comes in and decides to just give money to the farmer. Which is kind of what we do today, just by the by. There is one final argument. The parity prices are a special privilege, but it is to even out the wrongs by protective tariffs. The farmer has to pay more for industrial equipment because of tariffs. It is true that protective tariffs injure the farmers far more than they know. Tariffs also cause retaliatory tariffs on them. So, if one country produces food and the other country produces industrial equipment, when people start leveling tariffs, they're not going to both levy tariffs on industrial equipment. One's going to levy tariff on industrial goods, and the other one is going to levy tariffs on food. And so you're going to have, not only is the farmer going to be hit with the tariff on industrial goods, but they're also going to be hit with the tariff from the other country on their food.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is there a major difference between sanctions and tariffs?
So sanctions actually just keep you from selling in a different country. Meanwhile, tariffs just are a tax.
Okay. So you wouldn't say like a prohibitive tariff wouldn't be the same.
It's not technically, but it might be in effect. Like if I put a 200% tariff on a country, it's almost like a sanction.
Okay.
Yeah, a sanction is like it's like a legal thing. So it's you can't buy or you can't sell to or from this country. Like a tariff is just like a fiscal thing. So the tariff may be bad to the point where the country wouldn't trade at all, but it's not like a legal thing.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
But this argument about tariffs does not hold scrutiny, as there is no general tariff on industrial goods. There are tariffs on specific industries. But let us think about the city worker who would be penalized twice for industrial goods and then farm goods if we try to have a tariff on industrial goods and then subsidize farm goods, because you'd be tariffing industrial goods, making the price higher, but then you'd also be taxing from the city worker to subsidize the farmer, and so the city worker would have to not only pay extra taxes, but he'd have to pay higher prices for everything. Now, we could try to subsidize everyone equally for how they were harmed, but we wouldn't know if we were doubling up on subsidization or leaving someone out of protection from harm of these tariffs. This seems to be the weakest argument in the chapter, because while it is true the economy is complex, It just, I don't know. It just seems like this argument that we wouldn't be able to figure out how the tariff is hurting people. It's just kind of weak. But the better point is that even if we could equally subsidize everyone for what we lose in tariffs, we would be losing that in taxing everyone, so we could subsidize everyone. And then we'd also be losing the efficiency in taxing people, because not 100% of your tax dollars is spent on the things that they're supposed to is not spent 100% on the services and goods that they're supposed to be served on. Some of it is spent on taxing people, for instance, or having a Congress or having a president and stuff like that.
Yep.
And so, the parity price system and protectionist tariff policy benefits farmer industrialists at the expense of the forgotten man, the worker inside the cities, which is quite a few people. So, chapter 14, Saving the X Industry. We shall start this chapter by introducing the calamity that means we must save Industry X. The lobbies of Congress, are filled with representatives of the X industry. The X industry is suffering. It can only be saved by some type of governmental intervention. If it is allowed to die, its workers will be thrown out on the streets, and the people who depend on the business of the workers will lose money. If Congress will just act, it will buy equipment from other industries, it will employ people, and those workers will give more business to other businesses in an ever-widening circle. It is obvious this is the generalized case. I haven't actually mentioned what industry this is, but this is basically the argument that every industry that is dying off makes.
Right, I think a famous one is General Motors.
Yeah, in present day, this would be General Motors. It would be Ford. Well, Ford, to a lesser extent, it would be a lot of banks except for Wells Fargo. But so one such industry, this is actually the example I was talking about earlier. One such industry Congress tried to save was the coal industry. It started by setting a minimum price of coal and ended with setting the price of 350,000 different prices relating to coal. The hilarious bit is antitrust laws was supposed to stop this exact thing, but government is aware that such price fixing has stemmed from historically. Also, in middle of the road policy leads to socialism. The main thrust of the article by Mises, or at least one big section of the article, it is that price fixing requires you to set prices in ever-widening circles as shortages and surpluses are just found, just rampant throughout the economy because of the price fixing. And thus you have basically nationalized the entire economy. Welcome back, Emo.
Okay, I guess I'm the one that disappeared.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So the result of trying to fix the coal was to accelerate the transition to other types of power production, and this is what we saw in the sugar example, in the high fructose corn syrup. All of these government interventions essentially get the economy to just transition to something else, as you muck with either the price of one thing or subsidize one thing. It just makes people move, essentially. But we should not be concerned so much with specific instances, but the general argument that if an industry is allowed to be diminished or done away with, it will bring down the rest of the economy with it. So my editor. So this is the argument that we should still produce buggies for horses to pull. This type of argumentation is just the argumentation that we should not have technology advancements that do away with one industry and grow another industry. And we'll see this going forward, but this is just kind of like what I'm familiar with talking about the absurdity of this argument. So, this is also the generalized argument for parity prices in farming, but there are other forms of argument that use to save the X industry. One is that the X industry is overcrowded and thus we need to keep other firms from entering, and another argument is that the X industry needs to be subsidized by the government. So let's deal with the overcrowding. If X industry is really overcrowded, capital wouldn't come in. Capital does not rush to industries that are dying, nor do investors seek industries with large risk of loss and minimal chances of gains. So if it is true that the X industry is really overcrowded, no legislation or regulatory action is necessary to keep people from entering that industry.
Right. I don't understand like the argument. Like, who gets to decide if something's overcrowded? Like, people just won't spend their money then.
Yep.
At those particular businesses if, the ones that already exist are doing just fine.
Yeah. It's mainly basically what I can see from this argument is it's a big corporation that doesn't want competitors, and they're like, oh, we can supply the economy just fine. We don't need competition. So,
Yeah, that's all I could assume too. This is just corporations and lobbyists trying to kill competition.
Yep. I think we have a new watcher. So, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to throw something in chat, and we'll respond to it. So let's continue. If new capital and new labor is kept out of X industry by monopoly, cartels, union policy, or legislation, then it deprives capital and labor of liberty of choice. It forces investors to place their money in some other less promising industry. In short, capital and labor will be less efficiently employed. This will lead to lower living standards. As a result of this, will mean less money and wages for workers or higher costs of living. It is true that it will help the X industry remain more profitable, but it will only only at the cost of industries A, B, and C. So,
Right.
Similar results will come from subsidizing the X industry. It would just be a wealth transfer to X industry from everyone else. The only advantage of a subsidy is that it makes this wealth transfer clear and leaves less room for intellectual obfuscation. This is because when you start regulating and things like that, it's less obvious what's going on to the average person. But if you're literally just handing an industry money, it's way more obvious that it's a wealth transfer.
Yeah.
This is not the only effect of a subsidy. The other effect is that capital and labor will be diverted away from industries where they are more efficiently used to the subsidized industry. This is almost inherent in the complaints of Industry X. So it is the health of a dynamic economy for some industries to grow and some industries to die off. And this is almost inherent in the complaints of Industry X. If it is dying, why should it be kept alive? The idea that an expanding economy expands all industries is a profound error. Improved methods of production must supplant obsolete methods of production. You know, the horse and buggy must be supplanted by the car and the semi-truck.
Right. Taco Salad said you sound like Yarn Brook.
I don't know who that is. I've heard of his name before.
He's an objectivist.
Oh. I sound like a Jew, apparently. Okay. So.
Yeah, you had to cope with that for a second.
Yeah. My grandpa has also called me a Jew because I like to save money. And
Terrible.
also, I have the thing from my dad where I don't spend money that much. Like,
Hey, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm like, why should I go out to eat when I can just make something at home for cheaper and, you know, spend money elsewhere or just save it?
Good sandwich making skills at home is part of the division of labor as well.
It's actually the destruction of the division of labor. I should get a wife to do that.
This stream just got shut down. Just kidding. Just kidding.
You actually scared me for a second.
What?
Oh, my bad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what you mean by scared. I was about to say, like, what? Having a wife barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen is not a bad thing.
No, it's because he said the stream got shut down. Like, imagine that, like, 30 seconds after we say the J word.
So, this basically, LOL, don't worry, people say I sound like Ben Shapiro. Apparently you talk fast, Taco. I didn't really get that from watching your videos in the past, but maybe you talk fast in, regular conversation. And not when you're trying to explain things. But that's basically the end of chapter 14. I don't know if either one of you have anything to really add to that.
I don't. The saving the industry is something I'm sure many people are familiar with now, with the whole too big to fail, thing that's been going on for years. And other industries, Walmart and other corporations getting subsidies or tariffs being put in place to cause other businesses to come into existence or save them or anything like that. It's from the company I keep, it seems like something most people are familiar with as an argument.
Yep.
I'm interested in the price system, how the price system works, because
Yeah, and we actually get into Robinson Crusoe economics, which is what I'm most familiar with when dealing with Austrian economics. And it's like, it's what you do before you get to Economics 101, which is just mind-boggling why, well, I understand why universities and high schools don't go into this, but it's mind-boggling why more people don't know Robinson Crusoe economics. So, we should probably get into that. So, the whole point of this book is the lesson we covered in Chapter 1, that in studying the effects of any economic proposal, we must not only trace the immediate effects, but the long-run effects, and not just confine ourselves to the groups involved, but to all groups. It is not doing this It is not doing this that the largest economic fallacies stem from. It is the fallacy of isolation that the production for use and not for profit school is based, with its attack on the price system. The error these people make is the error that most monetary cranks and share the wealth charlatans make. These technocrats could turn anything you want into an almost unlimited supply. So he doesn't really talk about technocrats in the book, but he's talking about engineers and scientists and stuff like that, and this just reminds me of the technocrats generally. We'll be like, oh, we have an economic science that allows us to, like with MMT theory, we have an economic science that allows us to create things out of nothing by printing pieces of paper. We will have, all of these stupid, welfare policies and things like that, all these arguments, and it's just like, they're basically, they don't believe that we live in a scarce society, that products and services are really scarce, that they can just have unlimited of everything.
Where does that worldview come from? Like, that we don't, from the perspective of the technocrats, where are they getting that idea from?
So as we'll see, that this is a fallacy of isolation. They're basically looking at the production of shoes and showing that we can produce so many more shoes, not realizing that the resources that could be made to make more shoes could be better spent, let's say, making shorts or something else.
Okay.
However, the idea that there is no scarcity, the first time I've ever came across this in the history of ideas was the utopian socialists of the early 1800s. That believed that basically, outside of some services like garbage collection and everything, that without capitalism we would have infinite everything.
So this is like the argument, like, there's homeless people without shoes, so you should be able to just like make as many shoes as possible, and then give everybody who doesn't have shoes in the world, basically.
Yeah, this is also
eliminate that injustice of shoeless people.
Yeah, this is also like an argument that we have 400,000 homes that are not filled and 300,000 homeless. We should just give the homeless the homes.
I remember holding that argument for a long time.
Yep. And it basically the reason why that's wrong kind of is brought into in this chapter. It's the price system. We wouldn't know how many houses to build if we didn't have a price system. So, as Hazlitt actually says, there are so many errors in this view that they cannot be disentangled all at once. We can better understand we can understand this better if we understand the basic problem that business is trying to solve. So let us simplify. We will think of Robinson Crusoe economics. Crusoe just washed up on a desert island. His wants at first seem endless. He needs shelter, water, food, and a host of other needs. He must prioritize his needs, though. Say his biggest need is water. So he creates a hole in the sands or some basic receptacle to catch rainwater. Next, he needs food before he can expand his water catching system. So he makes a spear. And catches some food. He must then make shelter before he increases his production of water or food. Everything he everything he does delays or prevents him from doing something else. He is presented with the problem of alternative things to do with his time and resources. Doing one thing prevents him from doing other things. This is basically it. This is basically an example of opportunity cost, but the reason why Robinson Crusoe economics is there instead of just explaining opportunity cost or anything else that it's trying to explain is because it's a concrete example that doesn't allow people to ignore it. Because they cannot just say Robinson Crusoe can just do all of these things simultaneously. They obviously know that's impossible. Go ahead, Emo.
I was gonna ask where the name Robinson Crusoe came from. Like, why is it called that? Or is it just the name of the person they decided to have wash up on shore?
I believe Robinson Crusoe is it's the name of a novel, and it's a guy who washed up on a desert beach.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah. So he
Not
spends
much more to say than that.
Yeah, he spends 28 years on a remote tropical desert island. And so when you're talking about Robinson Crusoe economics, you're talking about like the economics of what he would have done. And, you know, the plot goes into what he did, but you can basically see that he has to prioritize what things he has to do and so on and so forth. And that's just opportunity cost. But But a family might make this problem easier to solve in your mind. So imagine if a family washed up on a desert island. It has more mouths to feed, yes, but it also has more hands to work. It can practice the division and the specialization of labor. The father can hunt, the mother can prepare the food, and the children can gather firewood. But the family cannot have the same people always doing the same thing. The time will come for one of them to say, get more water. The family, too, has the constant problem of choosing among alternative applications of labor. If the family gets capital like guns, a boat, fishing equipment, axes, saws, it must choose between alternative applications of labor and capital. It will be silly if a brother complained that he could gather more wood if his brother would help him, instead of gathering fish that were needed for dinner. It is here recognizable that one's occupation can only expand at the cost of other occupations. You can in order to have more plumbers in your city, those workers have to stop working other jobs, essentially.
Right. You couldn't have an economy of literally everybody's a plumber.
Yep. So these Crusoe economics are ridiculed by those that need them the most, who fail to understand the most basic principles illustrated by them. And so that's also kind of why I really like Crusoe economics, is because of how concrete the examples are, and so on and so forth. And really, it shows you praxeology in practice, because there's no giant abstractions with praxeology that when you try to apply it to a complex economy like the one in America. When you get to, you are on a desert island, the praxeology is very clear on what is going on.
Right. You just have to imagine like what you would have to do to survive.
Yep. But let us turn to such a complex society then. How is the problem of alternative applications of labor and capital to meet thousands of different needs and wants of different urgencies solved in such a complex society? It is solved precisely by the price system. It is solved through the constant changing interrelationships of costs of production, prices, and profits. Prices are fixed through the relationship of supply and demand, and in turn affect supply and demand. For instance, let's say more people want a product. The more people that want it, the price for that. The more people want a product, the higher the price will be for that product. The higher the price, the higher the profits. The higher the profits, the more of that product are produced by those in the business, and the more promising that business is to investors. The increased production of the product will drop prices. This is just basic supply and demand. As prices fall, the least efficient producers will no longer be able to maintain a profit and will be driven out of business. As less efficient producers are driven out of business, supply will contract or at least stop expanding. This is the origin of the idea that costs of production are the basis of prices. But that doctrine is not true. It is supply and demand that determine prices. It is true in part that supply is determined by costs of production. What the past costs to produce the good cannot determine its production. What will determine it is what will determine it is what the cost to produce in the future is and what the expected price in the future will be. So, and that process affects future supply. Thus, there is a consistent tendency for the price of a commodity and the marginal cost of production to equal each other, but the marginal cost of production does not determine the price of the commodity.
Okay.
And this is actually something that people who have government jobs tend to just not understand. They think that the cost of production is the cost of the commodity. I know this because I have some friends that are government employees. They're smart people, they just don't know anything about economics.
Tell them to watch this.
LOL, I don't think I want to dox myself to my friends, though.
Yeah, and I am not good at explaining things, so yeah.
Yeah. So, the private enterprise system may be compared to a system of computers all regulated by an automatic governor. I don't know if you know what a governor is.
Well, in these terms,
Do you know what a governor is on a steam engine?
no.
So a governor on a steam engine regulates the speed of the steam engine. It's basically two balls that rotate along with the steam engine, and if the steam engine gets too high of a speed, the balls spread out too far. Let's say it's basically two pendulums on either side of each other. And so as the speed increases, the balls get pushed out. And if the speed goes too high, the balls go too far out, and the governor starts slowing down the speed of the steam engine so the balls can be in the proper space.
Okay.
This is kind of what the economy is. It's a bunch of different computers regulated by an automatic governor. And then each of these computers are interconnected and influencing each other, so in effect they act as one great machine called the economy. Thus, every departure from equilibrium sets in motion forces that tend to bring it back into equilibrium. Okay. So, let us get to the main concern of these people that say that we should have production for use and not for profit. If demand falls for a product, then its price goes lower, and thus its production declines. It is this development that scandalizes those who do not understand the price system. Why shouldn't whatever product it is not be produced as much as it can be? Why should it be guided by the market? They conclude that the price system and private enterprise are merely a form of scarcity economics, as they put it. This fallacy comes from only looking at one industry and not what would have to be given up to maximize production in that industry. Industry can only expand at the expense of other industries. It is thus erroneous to conclude that a decline in one line of production must mean a decline across the economy. Let us think back to that family on the desert island. If one brother wants to take the other brother to help him cut wood to maximize production of cutting wood, well, you're not going to have any more fish because that brother was catching fish originally. And so you're just maximizing one while decreasing another industry or decreasing another line of goods. And so not everything should be maximized.
Right, because one of the brothers, they can both be good at chopping wood, but one of the brothers probably sucks at fishing.
It's not even just that. Let's say even if they're both equally as good at each other, the division of labor allows you to do both things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why the division of labor and the specialization of labor are different. Now, the division of labor does lead to the specialization of labor, but they're independent concepts.
Okay.
So everything is at the cost of something else. Everything you do is at the cost of not doing something else. This is just opportunity cost, pure and simple. It is precisely the price system that determines how much and what is produced in the economy. These technocrats always try to improve it for some whaling pressure group. The results of their various interventions will be studied in next week's podcast. So, that's basically the end of my notes. If you have anything to add. So, we do have a comment by Taco Salad. I can't find it, but Joseph T. Salerno did a whole presentation on the early utopian socialists somewhere on Mises Media YouTube page. Yeah, I believe I actually watched that, if I am remembering that correctly. It was someone on Mises that did a presentation on early utopian socialists, and that's basically what I remember. But I believe I watched that like 2 years ago, so I don't have the best memory of what's exactly all of their deficiencies. I just remember it just being completely economically illiterate. And as who was it? I believe it was Hoppe pointed out. Back in the 19th century, socialist and economist were considered to be antonyms. Which
they should still be.
Yeah, they still should be considered antonyms.
That goes for Keynesians too.
Yep, but Keynesians, like, if you look at the people that support Keynes now, like Ray on Twitter and things like that, they actually call themselves realist socialists now. And
I'm sure
they're basically saying that their way of implementing socialism is just a realist way of implementing socialism. And we might disagree that it's pragmatic, but we do agree that they are socialists. So, at least they're owning up to what they are now.
Yeah. This is kind of related, but not really. But do you know about the Fabian socialists?
No, I thought the Fabian socialists and the utopian were kind of related, though.
I don't know much about them, but they were different from the Marxist socialists. I know that. but in terms of what they want to achieve, it's the same thing. They just go about it differently. But I do find it.
They so I just looked them up, but they're a British socialist organization whose purpose is to advance the principles of democratic socialism via gradualist and reformist effort in democracies rather than a revolutionary overthrow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And
I
I'm sure you can see
their.
I'm sure you can see their crest on the page as well. And if you notice, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yep. That's
Which tells you all you need to know. They don't really care about branding very much.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back in history, especially like 100 years ago, the people become far more forward with what they're suggesting. Meanwhile, now they just basically lie to you in Western countries about what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Like, today we're talking about the defunding of police, but really what they mean is they want to defund one type of police and fund another type of police that is more in line with the socialist re-education type program. And it's just like, that's not what ANCAPs would want for defunding the police, you know?
Yeah.
It's basically the exact opposite. We don't want a federal police force, essentially, that goes around and re-educates people. Can't arrest violent criminals, but can arrest someone for hate speech and re-educate them. So.
Yeah. That just kind of black-pilled me every time I think about it now.
Yeah, basically we've seen a sharp turn towards revolutionary Marxism in the past like week and a half, and it is fairly blackpilling when you stop to think about it.
Yeah. I don't have much to say other than that. I just got kind of sad.
I understand. So, Taco, are you still there?
How many viewers do we still got? Is it just one now? Everybody leave?
I don't think it's. I've never seen it get above 4, but I have no idea how many actually watched it.
For me, it
I
says
X'd
4,
out.
but I don't know.
Yeah, I just X'd out and went back, and it's 4.
Yeah. So, this might be a bad week, essentially, for this podcast. We never got to like 10 or 11 like we did the past couple weeks, but rip.
It's okay. We're all learning.
Yep.
So, does anybody have any questions in the chat, or?
Yeah, so Taco says, I don't think people have it in their stomach to gauge an outright war with each other. I don't know how true that is, because I think the left has basically shown in the past week and a half they're willing to use violence. But I think that the state is basically going to use these people to basically become way more socialist. I mean, Trump has already talked about expanding Gibbs to the blacks, and on Fox News, which is basically what Trump watches, it started talking about reparations, which would be basically almost doubling the amount of Gibbs blacks get right now, because right now on net, blacks cost us about the budget of the U.S. military, and he's talking about increasing that by almost the amount of the U.S. military.
I didn't know that.
Well, at least that's what the guy on Fox News said, and Trump watches it, so you have to think that Trump is thinking about that, and Trump might be the first black president. So,
Yeah. Um,
yeah.
I
I
don't have much
don't
else to say.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how much of a hot war it would be because of how infiltrated into the government they are. They might just basically use this as an excuse to adopt way more policies that they actually want to have in originally, because the neocons are basically just infiltrate the conservative movement and or socialists, and then the Democrats have just been pretending to not be socialist for the longest time. So all of this violence that we're seeing could be definitely used to bring us way more into socialism than before.
Uh,
Which
I'm just
would mean, yeah.
dumping
Jared,
black pills in my mouth.
yeah, the Jared might be true that Jared might be right that the time for solutions has passed, like peaceful solutions. Just because, like, the implicit secession that my article was talking about actually requires time to be able to make it. Can't happen in like a week.
Yeah, you got to convince a lot of people that America is worth giving up on.
Yeah, and so, and not only just give up on, but it can't. Federal control can't be so widespread that we're basically the Soviet Union. But that's but this time next week.
Yeah.
So it's just. It's just the implicit secession might be able to happen, but it might be too late to actually implement it. Yeah, I don't know. I personally will probably wait a week or two to see if these die down, and they're just like the Ferguson riots of 2016.
Yeah. Didn't I see like I thought I saw like an article saying that the NAACP was like lobbying the UN for sanctions or something on America for like our treatment of black people.
Yep.
I don't want to starve. I didn't do anything to anybody.
Well, the thing is that America produces 27% of the world's food, so we wouldn't be starving.
Good point.
The only thing is that the only if America consented to the sanctions could the sanctions happen, because America would be has veto power in the UN.
Mm.
Which is why
Well,
all of the sanctions that America has put on Russia has had to be unilateral. It can't go through the UN because Russia also has veto power in the UN. It's a voting state.
okay. I'm not too familiar with the I guess the international powers and all that.
Yeah. But
So
anyways, we've digressed far enough from economics in one lesson. I guess we'll see you guys on Twitter after the stream, so we can cut it.
Alright, do you guys want to show your Twitters?
I'm Colton. I'm at Hetsu very much.
I'm emo. I'm at emo Hoppean 346.
I'm Kyle. I didn't talk much, but I'm hosting the stream, so I'm at UFFZ Kyle All the handles are on the top right corner of the stream, so you don't have to, guess what we're spelling. But yeah.
Yep.
All right. See you guys.
Yep. See ya.
Later.